Why is my head smaller than yours?
Because I'm leaning forward. There you go. Okay, so this is...
Hold on a second.
Okay.
No.
Okay, very good. All right, so Dad, as part of this Frank project, Frank being an acronym for Francis reluctantly acquires neuroscience knowledge. As part of that, because his son is on the cutting edge of neurophilosophy, I'm going to be explaining to you and to him some of the vocabulary that I've come up with so that we can talk about the mind's processes. So I call it vocabulary for, voice theory, and then the subtitle that I had put when I made this a few months ago was how to talk about our naturally selected, automatically executed code. Okay, so here's what I reckon. Today what we'll do is I will define voice theory and define and explain why new vocabulary is needed. Okay, that'll be maybe 3 or 4 slides, which you can try to keep it under 10 minutes. And then for every day going forward, we're going to do 1 slide, which, it has typically maybe 2 vocabulary words. Okay, here we go. For instance, this should be... Anyway, okay, spill, miss. Okay, there you go. Sometimes we have more, but anyway, we're going to try to keep those to 5 minutes. So what do you say? Do you give us permission?
Carry on.
Okay. So, all right, so what is voice theory? Okay, so a voice, which is going to be a word that we're going to define in a video in the future, but we're also going to define it now. It's basically just a mental action. Okay, it can be any mental action, any mechanism, any processing of information, any output, whatever. We call that a single voice, and then the self is composed of a whole bunch of these mechanisms and mental actions interacting. Okay, and these mental actions are determined by natural selection, and then during the lifetime, culture and experience, which have epigenetic effects and then also direct effects on the organization of the mental actions. Okay. So on this slide, I talk about how the self doesn't exist, but what we're going to do is we're going to go to this one. So what voice theory replaces, certain assumptions that we have about ourselves, certain illusions that we have, that voice theory tries to replace as a new basis for understanding the mind. So there are certain errors that we make that sort of fundamental errors in our understanding of the mind and how we try to explain it. One is the integration myth, and then another is the ego myth, and these combine to form the judge myth. So let me explain the judge myth. So basically, if you imagine the mind as a courtroom where there's all these instincts, all these people that are expressing their opinions, right? We tend to have this illusion that in the courtroom, in some central position, is the judge who hears all of what everybody is saying, and then with all of his knowledge and logical prowess, draws a conclusion. Okay? And we saw 2 myths, 2 assumptions in that scenario. One is integration, so entire integration, meaning that all of the opinions shared, the evidence expressed or whatever, known in the courtroom, all of it is shared with the judge and known by the judge. So this idea that all these mental actions are integrated. And then the second is that there's this ego, there's this one central figure that has this control and knowledge over all of the mental actions. There is no self. We are just the sum of all of these parts at any given time. And also, we are not integrated. There are some parts that are interacting with some parts that are interacting with other parts, and some parts that aren't, etc. Okay? Another way to look at it is what I call, this is more recent, the Warsaw illusions, which are the 4 basic, that I've come up with, the basic incorrect assumptions that we have about the mind. One is that desire can be a first cause, as in free will. So if we want to do something, that desire can then produce a behavior, rather than the behavior being triggered by external circumstances that then, trigger processes here, etc. That you can just start with a desire and then produce a behavior. That the desire itself doesn't have a cause. Okay? So that illusion of free will, the illusion of reason, that somehow all of these brain actions and mechanisms are perfectly calibrated such that we always know the right thing to do with the information that we receive, and we always know how to follow it to its conclusion. It's an absurdly arrogant illusion, and it just doesn't make any sense how that could have evolved, that all these mechanisms are perfectly calibrated. The single operator, that we are a single thing acting. We are a single agent with maybe consistent motivations, and from moment to moment, the mechanisms that produce one action are the same mechanisms that produce another. We have this illusion of continuity in our perspective, although we are not actually a single operator. It may be this voice triggered a behavior, this voice can trigger a behavior, etc. And then single observer. This voice could process information from the outside or process another action. This voice could process blah, blah, and so we're not a single observer either. Okay. So I think that might be... Oh, okay. And then the last thing. So what is critical thinking? So my definition of critical thinking breaks critical thinking into 3 parts. Okay? Critical recognition, critical reflection, and critical research. Okay? Critical recognition is the foundation of all of critical thinking, namely critical reflection and critical research. Critical recognition is recognizing the nature, including the limits, of the thinking apparatus. Right? Because you're not going to be able to critically think if you don't know how thinking naturally occurs. Right? And so you have to have some sense of which judgments tend to be reliable, which mechanisms tend to be reliable, and which ones don't. Now, once you know that, you're now in a position to, when you reflect, have a better idea of how you could respect logical principles. You won't be just following logical principles. The mental actions will occur, and if you have some understandings of those mental actions that tend to occur in the human brain, then you can maybe make corrections to better imitate logical principles. But you have to know where you're starting from and what happens naturally. And then finally, critical research and critical reflection, critical research, they're like this, right? Empiricism and reason, right? Getting information from the outside being the research, and then reflection processing that information, okay? So critical research is whether you're doing the hands-on empiricism, you're the scientist in the lab, okay, I need to be aware of the observation effect, I need to do double-blind, research, etc. And that's all based on the fact that I need to not know what I'm giving the subjects, right? Because I have critical recognition, I know that my brain, if it knows what I'm giving the subject, that could affect the outcome, right? And then there's also critical research in the acquiring of information through literature review, being vigilant about the sources, etc. And knowing that if the author's pretty, you may be inclined, because of the halo effect, to trust that article more. So critical recognition means, it's raining. So critical recognition means knowing that there are things like anyway, so that's it, and then that's it.
Thank you. That's great.
Good.
Very good. Excellent.